My sister called me pathetic for working 3 jobs until she saw my penthouse downtown. This is the story of how I proved her and everyone else wrong. It all started at what was supposed to be a quiet family dinner. The air in my parents' modest dining room was thick with the smell of roasted chicken and my sister Rachel's expensive perfume, a cloying scent that always seemed to announce her arrival before she did. My sister called me pathetic for working 3 jobs until she saw my penthouse. This is how I proved her wrong. Subscribe and like to see my journey from the bottom to the top. She sat across from me, dangling a new designer handbag from her wrist. "It's Italian leather," she announced to no one in particular. "Mark got it for me as an early anniversary gift. Isn't he just the best?" My mother smiled weakly, while my father, George, just kept cutting his chicken. Rachel's eyes then landed on me. "So, Allison," she began, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "What's new with you? Still juggling all those little jobs?" I stiffened, my fork hovering over my plate. "They're not little jobs, Rachel. They pay my bills." "Oh, of course," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "But what are they again? Waitress, dog walker, and what was the other one? Drawing logos for people on the internet?" "I'm a freelance graphic designer," I corrected her through gritted teeth. "And I'm good at it." She let out a small, condescending laugh. "Darling, it's just a bit pathetic, don't you think? Running around town exhausted, smelling like wet dogs and diner grease just to scrape by. You're 26. You should be settling down, finding a successful man to take care of you. Like I did." The word hung in the air. Pathetic. It felt like a slap. I looked at my worn-out sneakers under the table, my hands with their chipped nail polish from scrubbing tables at the diner that morning. A wave of shame washed over me, so hot and intense it made my eyes water. I saw the pity in my mother's eyes and the discomfort on my father's face. But beneath the shame, a different feeling started to burn. Anger. A cold, hard resolve began to form in my chest. I didn't say another word for the rest of the dinner. I just ate my food, the taste of ashes in my mouth, while Rachel went on and on about her country club and the vacation to Hawaii she and Mark were planning. I didn't want a rich husband to buy me things. I wanted to earn them myself. I wanted a success so undeniable that even she couldn't dismiss it. Later that night, as I was helping my dad with the dishes, he put a hand on my shoulder. George was a quiet man, a carpenter who believed in the strength of one's own hands. He didn't say much, but he saw everything. "Don't let her words get to you," he said softly. "Your sister measures life with a price tag. You don't." He dried a plate and stacked it carefully. "Remember what I always told you. Real wealth isn't what you have, Allison. It's what you build with your own 2 hands." His words were a balm on my wounded pride. He was right. I wasn't just working 3 jobs. I was building something. Every dollar I saved, every late night I spent perfecting a design was a brick in the foundation of the life I wanted. A life that would be entirely my own. When I got back to my tiny 1-room apartment that night, the city lights twinkled outside my window. They looked like scattered diamonds. I opened my old laptop, the screen flickering to life. My desktop background was a photo of the skyline, dominated by a sleek glass tower with a sprawling penthouse on top. It was an absurdly ambitious dream, a fantasy I kept for myself. But after Rachel's comment, it wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a target. I opened my design software and pulled up the project I was working on for a small tech startup. The client, a guy named Nathan, was demanding but fair. He saw potential in my work. As my fingers flew across the keyboard, I felt the exhaustion of the day fade away, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated drive. I would build my empire, 1 pixel at a time. And one day, Rachel wouldn't be laughing. She'd be asking for an invitation. I just didn't know how soon that day would come. The days that followed that dinner blurred into a marathon of exhaustion and caffeine. My life became a strict, color-coded schedule. 5 a.m. was for the dogs, a pack of 5 energetic beasts from a wealthy neighborhood who dragged me through perfectly manicured parks as the sun rose. The crisp morning air was my only moment of peace before the city truly woke up. By 8 a.m., I'd trade my sneakers for non-slip work shoes and the smell of fresh dew for the permanent scent of bacon grease at the diner. I'd spend the next 8 hours refilling coffee cups, memorizing orders, and forcing a smile for customers who barely saw me as a person. They saw an apron and a pair of hands. Then, my real day would begin. I'd come home to my tiny apartment, the one Rachel would probably need a hazmat suit to enter, and collapse onto my chair. But I wouldn't sleep. I'd open my laptop, and for the next 6 or 7 hours, I was Allison, the graphic designer. This was the job Rachel mocked, the one she couldn't understand. But it was the only one that felt like me. It was the one where I was building something. My work with Nathan and his startup, SyncSpace, became my obsession. He was launching a new productivity app and needed a full brand identity. It started with a logo, but my passion for the project was obvious. I sent him not just one logo, but a whole presentation deck showing how it could be used on a website, on merchandise, on app icons. I didn't just give him a design, I gave him a vision. One night, after a particularly grueling shift at the diner where a customer had complained that my smile wasn't sincere enough, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Nathan. My heart hammered against my ribs. Clients like him were usually brief, often critical. I braced myself for a list of revisions. Instead, the email was short and stunning. Allison, I just showed your presentation to our seed investors. They were blown away. They thought this was the work of a major design firm. We need to talk. Are you free for a call tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I read the email 3 times. Investors. Major design firm. Those words echoed in my quiet apartment, louder than any insult Rachel had ever thrown at me. A giddy, unfamiliar feeling bubbled up inside me. It was hope. The next morning, I took the call from the diner's break room, a cramped closet that smelled like stale bread. I pressed the phone to my ear, trying to block out the clatter of plates and the manager yelling about an order. We got the funding, Allison, Nathan said, his voice electric with excitement. A lot more than we expected. And the investors made one thing very clear. They want the branding to stay exactly as you envisioned it. They want you. I sank onto an overturned milk crate, my legs suddenly weak. Me? You, he confirmed. I know you're freelancing, but I want to offer you a contract. A big one. We want you to be our lead designer for the official launch. This includes the website, the app interface, all marketing materials. It's a 6-month project. The pay would be substantial. He named a figure that made me choke. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was enough to quit the diner. It was enough to quit walking dogs. It was enough to finally, truly build. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. It was a photo of her and Mark on a yacht, champagne glasses in hand, the water a perfect turquoise behind them. The caption read, "Just another boring Tuesday. Hope you're surviving." I looked at the picture of her perfect, effortless life, the life she thought I should want, the life she thought I was failing to achieve. For the first time, I didn't feel a sting of jealousy or a hot flush of shame. I felt a calm, cool certainty. Surviving? I wasn't just surviving. I was about to start living. I looked at the contract from Nathan, saved on my phone. It was a simple PDF, a document full of legal text and numbers. But to me, it looked like a key. It was the first real, solid brick in the foundation my father, George, had talked about. I remembered his words with a clarity that felt like a prophecy. Real wealth isn't what you have, it's what you build with your own 2 hands. I was holding the blueprint. Now, all I had to do was build. I typed back a simple reply to Rachel. Doing just fine. Talk soon. Then I walked out of the break room, found my manager, and told him it was my last day. The morning after I quit the diner felt surreal. I woke up at 4:50 a.m. Out of habit, my body tensed for the shrill alarm that never came. For a moment, I just lay there in the quiet darkness of my apartment, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator. There was no rush, no frantic search for my dog walking leash, no dread of the greasy spoon smell that would cling to my clothes all day. There was only one job left to quit. My last walk with the dogs was bittersweet. I knew each of them by name, their quirks, their favorite spots to sniff. As they bounded through the park, their joy was infectious, but I felt a strange sense of detachment. This part of my life, the part where I was just scraping by, was officially over. When I dropped the last dog, a golden retriever named Gus, back at his house, his owner, a kind older woman named Mrs. Carroll, handed me my final payment. "We'll miss you, Allison," she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Whatever you're doing next, I hope it makes you very happy." "Thank you, Mrs. Carroll." "It already does," I replied, and the truth of those words settled deep in my bones. I walked back to my apartment, not as a dog walker or a waitress, but as a designer. I unlocked my door, and for the first time, the tiny space didn't feel like a temporary holding cell. It felt like a studio, my headquarters. I took the wad of cash from Mrs. Carroll and the last of my tips from the diner and put it all in a jar labeled Emergency Fund. Then I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and took a deep breath. My new life was starting right now. The first week was a revelation. I worked 12, sometimes 14-hour days, but it wasn't work. It was creation. Fueled by cheap coffee and the sheer thrill of it all, I poured every ounce of my energy into ThinkSpace. I designed the user interface, making it sleek, intuitive, and beautiful. I created a color palette that felt both professional and inspiring. I lost track of time, often realizing the sun was coming up and I hadn't slept. The exhaustion was there, a low hum in the background, but it was different from the bone-deep weariness of my old life. This was the ache of effort, of building something from scratch. Nathan was an ideal client. He was decisive and trusted my vision completely. We had daily video calls, and he'd watch, fascinated, as I shared my screen and brought his ideas to life. "This is incredible, Allison," he said during one call, his eyes wide. "It's better than I ever imagined. You're not just a designer, you're an architect." His words were like fuel. Every compliment, every piece of positive feedback erased a little more of Rachel's condescending laugh from my memory. The word pathetic was being replaced by words like incredible and architect. One evening, after a marathon design session, I leaned back in my chair, stretching my stiff muscles. My eyes scanned my little room. The paint was peeling in one corner, and my bed was just a mattress on the floor. From the outside, it was the definition of a struggling artist's apartment. The kind of place Rachel would photograph and send to her friends with a crying, laughing emoji. But I didn't see that anymore. I saw the birthplace of an empire, my empire. I remembered what my father, George, had always said, his voice calm and steady as he worked with his hands. "Real wealth isn't what you have, Allison. It's what you build with your own two hands." I was finally understanding what he meant. This wasn't about the money Nathan was paying me, though it was life-changing. It was about the act of building itself. I was constructing a future, a reputation, a life that was entirely mine, one carefully chosen font and perfectly aligned pixel at a time. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a group text from my mom. "Family dinner Sunday at our place. Rachel and Mark are coming. Hope to see you there, honey." My stomach tightened. Another dinner, another performance. But this time felt different. I wasn't the tired, defeated girl smelling of wet dogs and diner grease anymore. I was a lead designer. I was an architect. I looked at the screen, at the sleek app design I had just completed. It was good. It was more than good. It was professional, polished, and powerful, just like the woman I was becoming. I typed back my reply. "I'll be there." A small smile played on my lips. This time, when Rachel asked me what was new, I'd have an answer. I wasn't just surviving. I was building, and I was just getting started. The foundation was set, solid and strong. Now it was time to build the walls. I walked into my parents' house that Sunday feeling like a different person in the same skin. The familiar scent of my mom's cooking filled the air, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a retreat from a life I was barely enduring. It felt like visiting home. I wasn't wearing anything expensive, just a simple black dress and the same worn-out boots, but I had ironed the dress meticulously, and I stood up straight. My shoulders weren't slumped from carrying a heavy bag of dog leashes or from the sheer weight of exhaustion. Rachel and Mark were already there, lounging on the couch as if they owned it. She was showing my mother pictures of their yacht trip on her phone, her voice loud and performative. "And this is the view from our suite, Mom. You can't even imagine." She looked up as I came in, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. You managed to get the diner grease out of your hair for the occasion. I'm impressed. The old Allison would have flinched. The old Allison would have felt a hot spike of shame and mumbled something defensive. But I just smiled calmly. It wasn't that hard, Rachel. I quit. That stopped her. She lowered her phone, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising. You what? Did you get fired? There was a hopeful, almost gleeful glint in her eye. Nope. I quit both jobs, actually, I said, walking over to the kitchen to help my dad, George, who was carving the roast. He gave me a small, knowing look. Don't be ridiculous, Rachel scoffed from the living room. You can't afford to quit. What are you going to do, live off your little internet drawings full-time? I took a deep breath. This was it. Not a confrontation, just a statement of fact. That's the plan. The startup I was freelancing for, SyncSpace, just secured a major round of funding. They hired me as their lead designer. It's a 6-month contract, full-time. Silence. My mother looked up, her face a mixture of surprise and relief. Mark, who had been scrolling on his phone, finally looked over at me with a flicker of interest. Rachel recovered first, forcing a laugh that sounded like cracking glass. A startup? Oh, Allison, honey, that's adorable. 90% of those fail in the first year. You left 2 steady jobs for a gamble? That's not just pathetic. It's financially irresponsible. Maybe, I said, shrugging as I picked up a stack of plates. But it's a gamble I'm willing to take on myself. At dinner, the atmosphere was tense. Rachel tried to steer the conversation back to her world of country clubs and designer brands, but her words felt hollow now. They didn't have the same power to make me feel small. I talked to my dad about his latest carpentry project and to my mom about her garden. I was present. I was calm. Then Mark's phone buzzed loudly on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his cheerful facade dropped like a stone. His face went pale. "Excuse me," he muttered, standing up so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. "I have to take this." He walked into the hallway, but his voice was sharp and carried back into the dining room. "What do you mean the payment didn't go through? It's a corporate account. Just run it again. No, I can't put more funds in right now. Just handle it." He came back to the table a few minutes later, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry about that. Market stuff. You know how it is." Rachel shot him a worried look, but quickly covered it up. "My husband, always working so hard," she said to the table, patting his hand. But I saw the slight tremor in her fingers. I saw the fear behind her eyes. Later, as I was getting ready to leave, my dad walked me to the door. He put his hand on my shoulder, his palm warm and calloused. "Lead designer," he said, his voice thick with pride. "I knew you were building something special, Allison. They just couldn't see the blueprints." I hugged him tightly. "Thanks, Dad." Driving home to my tiny apartment, I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I felt a profound sense of peace. Rachel's words were just noise now. Her life, which once seemed like a golden standard I could never reach, now looked like a fragile house of cards. Mark's tense phone call, Rachel's flicker of fear, it was a crack in their perfect, polished foundation. I unlocked the door to my studio, my headquarters, and the city lights twinkled at me through the window. My old laptop sat on the desk, waiting. It was my tool, my weapon, my entire world right now. I wasn't building my life to prove Rachel wrong anymore. I was building it for me. Because for the first time, I truly believed in the architect. The shame was gone, replaced by the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who was finally truly building her own future with her own 2 hands. And the view from here was already starting to look spectacular. The next few months were a blur of creative intensity. My tiny apartment became a cocoon, the outside world fading away until there was only the glow of my screen, the click of my mouse, and the endless stream of ideas flowing from my brain onto the digital canvas. I lived and breathed SyncSpace. I ate takeout over my keyboard and fell asleep on my couch with design mock-ups still open on my laptop. Some days, I wouldn't speak to another human being besides Nathan on our daily video calls. I was isolated, but I had never felt less alone. I had a purpose that was all-consuming. The day of the official launch arrived with a terrifying sense of finality. I had poured every ounce of myself into this project. If it failed, it would feel like a personal rejection of my very soul. I spent the morning pacing my small room, refreshing the App Store page every 30 seconds. Nathan and I were on a constant video call, two nervous faces staring at analytics dashboards. Then it started. A trickle of downloads became a stream, then a river, then a flood. By noon, we were trending. By 3 p.m., a major tech blog published a review. They praised the app's functionality, but they dedicated an entire paragraph to the design. SyncSpace is not only powerful, it's beautiful, the article read. Its user interface is a masterclass in intuitive, elegant design. It's the kind of app you want to use. I read that line over and over, the words blurring through a film of tears. A masterclass. They were talking about me, the girl who used to smell like wet dogs and diner grease. Nathan's whoop of joy on the video call snapped me back to reality. They love it, Allison. They love you. He was practically bouncing in his chair. The investors are ecstatic. We've already surpassed our first week download projections in 6 hours. The rest of the day was a dream. The numbers kept climbing. My phone buzzed with notifications from friends who had seen the app and recognized my style. It was a quiet victory, celebrated alone in my one-room apartment, but it was the most profound success I had ever known. A week later, I received a call from Nathan. His voice was serious, different from the giddy excitement of launch day. My stomach instantly nodded. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my mind racing through potential design flaws. "Everything is more than okay," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Allison, the board and I have been talking. Your contract is paid in full, of course. The check is on its way. But we want to do more. Your design wasn't just a service you provided. It's the core identity of this company. It's why people are signing up. You're not just a contractor to us. You're a founder, in spirit." I held my breath. "What does that mean?" "It means we're offering you equity," he said. "Stock options. A 1% stake in SyncSpace. It's not much now, but if we keep growing like this, it could be life-changing." 1%. It sounded so small, but I understood the implications. It was ownership. It was a piece of the foundation. It was real, tangible wealth that would grow as the company I helped build grew. I sank into my chair, speechless. The number on the contract had been enough to change my life. This was enough to build a new one entirely. That night, as I looked at the official stock option agreement Nathan had emailed over, my father's voice echoed in my mind. "Real wealth isn't what you have, Allison. It's what you build with your own 2 hands." I was looking at the proof. I hadn't been given this. I had built the value that this piece of paper represented. I had earned it, pixel by pixel. My phone rang and Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated for a second before answering. Her calls were usually summonses for some family event or opportunities for her to brag. "Allison, darling," she began, her voice strained with a false cheerfulness that was sharper than usual. "I saw that little app you worked on. It's all over the internet. How quaint." "It's going well," I said simply, refusing to take the bait. "Yes, well, you got lucky, I suppose," she said quickly. "Listen, the reason I'm calling, Mark and I are thinking of redecorating the guest room. You're so creative. I was wondering if you could pop over sometime and give us some ideas. For free, of course. For family." The request was so audacious, so typical of Rachel, that I almost laughed. A month ago, my work was pathetic internet drawings. Now that it was successful, she wanted it for free. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm too busy. My schedule is booked solid." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. "Oh," she said, her voice losing its fake warmth. "I see. Too busy for your own family now that you've had a tiny bit of success." The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. "Some things never change. You're still just as selfish as you've always been." She hung up before I could reply. I stared at my phone, not with anger, but with a sudden, startling clarity. She wasn't calling about redecorating. She was testing the waters. She was feeling the cracks in her own foundation and was looking to see if mine was strong enough to lean on. Her insult didn't even register. It was the desperate flailing of someone who measured life with a price tag, realizing her own was rapidly depreciating. I looked out my window at the city skyline, at the penthouse towers that once seemed like a distant fantasy. For the first time, they just looked like the next step. The silence after Rachel hung up was more telling than her words had been. It was a hollow space filled with years of slights and condescending remarks. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt done. Done with the person I was supposed to be in their story. The struggling artist, the pitiable younger sister, the one who would always need them more than they needed me. I looked at the stock agreement from Nathan, the numbers glowing on the screen. It wasn't just money. It was a permission slip to write my own story. The next morning, I didn't go to my part-time barista job. I called and quit. I did the same with the dog walking gig. I kept the freelance graphic design clients I actually enjoyed. But the rest, the soul-crushing work I did just to make rent, I let it all go. Then I made a different kind of call. "Good morning, Allison," a smooth voice said. "This is Paul from Prestige Realty. How can I help you?" "Hi, Paul," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm interested in looking at penthouse apartments downtown, specifically in the Olympus Tower." There was a brief pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating his assumptions about me. The Olympus Tower was the newest, most obscenely luxurious building in the city. "Of course," he said, his tone shifting from polite to enthusiastic. "An excellent choice. Are you free this afternoon? Say 2 p.m. I have a corner unit on the 50th floor that just came on the market. The view is transformative." That afternoon, as I stood in my cramped one-bedroom apartment waiting for my rideshare, I took one last look around. I saw the water stain on the ceiling that my landlord Gus had promised to fix for 2 years. I saw the stack of canvases leaning against the wall, gathering dust because I was always too tired to paint for myself. This place hadn't been a home. It had been a holding cell, a place to exist between shifts. I didn't feel sentimental. I just felt an overwhelming urge to leave. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire living space, offering a panoramic view of the city that made my old life feel like it was a million miles below. The floors were polished marble. The kitchen was filled with stainless steel appliances that looked like they belonged in a spaceship, and the master bathroom was bigger than my entire old apartment. The building has a 24-hour concierge, a rooftop infinity pool, and a private gym, Paul was saying, gesturing expansively. "It's more than an apartment, it's a lifestyle." I walked over to the window, placing my hand on the cool glass. I could see the small brick building where my parents lived, a tiny speck in the distance. I thought of Rachel in her perfect suburban house, probably rearranging the throw pillows on her beige sofa. They all thought they knew my place in the world. They were all wrong. "I'll take it," I said, not even asking the price. Paul's professional smile widened into a genuine grin. "Fantastic. I'll draw up the paperwork." My phone buzzed as I was signing the documents. It was my mother, who I'll call Sandra. I knew this call was coming. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, it buzzed again. And again. Finally, on the 4th try, I answered. "Allison, thank goodness." Sandra's voice was tight with anxiety. "I've been so worried. Rachel called me. She was very upset." "I'm sure she was," I said calmly, looking out at my new view. "Honey, she said you were rude to her. She was only asking for a little help. You know how much she values your opinion on things." I almost laughed. "Mom, she called my work quaint and internet drawings. She didn't value my opinion. She saw something successful and wanted a piece of it for free." Sandra sighed, a long, weary sound I knew well. It was the sound of her trying to keep the peace, a peace that always came at my expense. "It's just, things are a bit tight for them right now, Allison. Mark's business. It's not doing as well as they'd like everyone to believe. He lost a major contract." So there it was. The crack in the foundation I had sensed. It wasn't about a guest room. It was about the carefully constructed image of success they had built, and it was starting to crumble. "That's not my problem, Mom," I said, and the words felt both harsh and liberating. "But she's your sister." Sandra's voice rose. "Family is supposed to help each other." Did she help me when I was working 3 jobs and could barely afford groceries? I asked. Did she offer to help when I said I was starting my own business? No. She called me pathetic. She told me to get a real job. Silence. She knew I was right. I took a deep breath. I have to go, Mom. I'm busy. Busy being selfish, is that it? She snapped, her words echoing Rachel's. No, I replied, my voice soft but firm. I'm busy building something. I hung up the phone and looked around the vast, empty penthouse. My father's words came back to me, clear as day. Real wealth isn't what you have, Allison. It's what you build with your own 2 hands. I wasn't just building a company or a career. I was building a life. And for the first time, it was going to have a foundation that no one, not even my own family, could crack. The first thing I was going to buy for this place was a new set of paints and the biggest canvas I could find. The first few days in the penthouse felt like living inside a cloud. The space was so vast and white, my footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floors. I did exactly what I promised myself I would. I went to an art supply store and bought the largest canvas they had, so big it had to be delivered. I also bought tubes of paint in every color imaginable, brushes of all sizes, and a sturdy wooden easel. My first piece of furniture wasn't a sofa or a bed, but a place to create. I spent the next week working from home on my client projects during the day and painting at night. With the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation, I poured all my frustration, my hurt, and my quiet joy onto the canvas. It was a chaotic swirl of deep blues, fiery oranges, and defiant streaks of gold. I was building something from nothing, just like my father said. The piece was, of course, temporary. My phone started buzzing with notifications from a family group chat I usually kept muted. Rachel had posted a long, rambling message about the importance of family values and how some people forget where they come from when they get a little taste of success. It was so transparent it was almost funny. I didn't reply. Then came the direct messages. First, a picture of a leaky faucet in her kitchen. Ugh, everything is falling apart over here. Mark is just too swamped to fix it. I ignored it. A day later, a link to an article about the rising cost of private school tuition. Can you believe this? It's criminal. I ignored that too. Her messages grew more pointed, shifting from hints to outright accusations. It must be nice not to have to worry about anyone but yourself, my Aunt Carol called on Saturday morning. Allison, honey, your mother is worried sick, she said, her voice laced with manufactured concern. She says you've been ignoring your sister. Rachel is going through a very hard time. Did she tell you why she's having a hard time, Aunt Carol? I asked, dabbing a bit of white paint onto my palette. Well, no, not exactly. Just that Mark's work is stressful and that you've been a bit cold. I see, I said. Well, I'm sorry they're stressed. I'm quite busy right now, but thank you for calling. I kept my tone polite but firm. I wasn't going to be drawn into their drama. I wouldn't let them make me the villain of a story they wrote. Rachel's words felt like a slap, the shame so intense. What would you do when family belittles your hustle? Comment what you think and share this if you understand the struggle. That evening, my father called. I braced myself for another lecture, but his voice was quiet when he spoke. Allison? Hi, Dad, I said, my guard still up. Your mother told me you bought a new place, he said, ignoring the tension completely. Downtown, she said. Yeah, it's big, I laughed, unsure of what else to say. That's good, he said. There was a pause. Are you still doing your drawings on the computer? It's called graphic design, Dad, and yes, it's going very well. I'm also painting again, on a real canvas. I could almost hear him smile through the phone. I remember when you were a little girl, you painted a mural of a jungle on your bedroom wall. Your mother was so upset about the paint on the carpet, but I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen. I felt a lump form in my throat. He had never said that to me before. You keep building, Allison, he said softly. Don't let anyone stop you. He didn't mention Rachel. He didn't mention Mark or my mother's worries. He just saw me. He understood. As I hung up the phone, I looked at my half-finished painting. a vibrant world taking shape. My father's words echoed in the empty room, but this time they felt different, less like a memory and more like a blessing. Real wealth is what you build with your own two hands. He knew it wasn't just about money. It was about building a life that was truly mine. Just then, my laptop chimed with an email notification. I walked over and clicked it open. The subject line made my heart skip a beat. Project Proposal, National Ad Campaign. It was from a major creative agency I'd been dreaming of working with for years. They had seen my online portfolio and wanted to hire me for a 6-figure contract. My hands started to tremble as I read the details. This was it. This was the kind of foundation that couldn't be cracked, the kind of success Rachel couldn't comprehend and certainly couldn't ask for a piece of. This was something I had built. I read the email again, and a third time. The number in the contract didn't change. It was 6 figures with a 0 on the end that felt like a typo. For a moment, the world went silent. The city noise outside my penthouse window faded away, and all I could hear was the frantic beating of my own heart. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an anchor, a foundation, a fortress. It was the end of juggling 3 jobs, of ramen noodle dinners, of wondering if I'd make rent. It was the beginning of everything. My fingers, still trembling, typed out a reply. I kept it professional, concise, accepting the terms and expressing my excitement. The second I hit send, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 10 years. I walked over to my easel where my half-finished painting of a vibrant, chaotic cityscape stood waiting. I picked up a brush, dipped it in bright yellow paint, and added a streak of light to a building in the distance. My building. The next morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Allison?" a warm professional voice asked. "This is she," I answered, my stomach doing a nervous flip. "Hi, Allison. My name is Daniel. I'm the creative director at the agency. We are so thrilled to have you on board for the national campaign. Your portfolio is just phenomenal. It's exactly the fresh perspective we've been looking for." We talked for almost an hour. Daniel wasn't just a suit. He was an artist, too. He spoke about concepts, color theory, and emotional impact. He didn't ask about my credentials or my past jobs. He only cared about the work, about the art. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was speaking my native language with someone who truly understood it. "We want you to have full creative freedom on this, Allison," he said before we hung up. "This campaign is yours to build." Those words became my mantra. The next few weeks were a blur of creative energy. I turned a spare bedroom with a stunning view of the skyline into my official studio. I worked from sunrise to long past sunset, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The exhaustion I used to feel after a 16-hour day across 3 different jobs was gone. In its place was a deep, satisfying hum of creation. I was building something. I was sketching logos on a state-of-the-art tablet, not on napkins during a 10-minute break. I was collaborating with a team of professionals, not arguing with a coffee shop manager over a scheduling conflict. One afternoon, while working on a new design, I found myself smiling. I remembered my father's words on the phone, how he saw the jungle mural on my wall not as a mess, but as a masterpiece. I thought about all the small things I had built over the years. A portfolio, a reputation for being reliable, a tiny savings account. It all led to this. My father, George, always said, "Real wealth is what you build with your own 2 hands, brick by brick." And now I was laying the bricks for my own empire. I was so absorbed in my work that I almost didn't notice the world outside my bubble. I didn't call my family. I didn't have time. About a month into the project, my mother called me. Her tone was different this time. It wasn't the usual thinly veiled concern. It was strained, almost frantic. "Allison, honey, how are you?" she started, her voice a little too bright. "I'm good, Mom. Just very busy with the new project," I said, sketching with one hand while holding the phone with my other. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. We're so proud." There was a pause. "Listen, I was just talking to your sister." I braced myself. "Is everything okay with Rachel?" My mother let out a shaky sigh. "Well, not exactly. It's Mark, his company. It's not doing well. Some bad investments, I think. It's all very complicated." I stopped sketching. What kind of not well? They're going to lose the house, Allison, she whispered, and the words hung in the air between us. The bank is going to take it. They have 30 days. I was stunned into silence. Rachel's perfect life, her designer handbags, her condescending remarks about my little jobs. It was all built on a foundation of sand. That's terrible, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, she was still my sister. It is, my mother said, her voice cracking. They've lost everything. Mark's credit is ruined. They can't even get a loan for a small apartment. She took a deep breath, and I knew what was coming next. It felt like a slow-motion train wreck I was powerless to stop. Allison, honey, that new place you have, it's a penthouse, you said. Your father told me it was very big. Does it have a spare bedroom? The question hung in the silence, so heavy it felt like a physical object. A spare bedroom. My mother's voice, desperate and pleading, was asking me to offer a piece of my hard-won sanctuary to the very person who had mocked its foundation. I could hear the faint sound of traffic from the street 30 floors below, a distant hum that suddenly felt like the only real thing in the world. I looked around my spacious living area, at the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a view I had earned with every early morning and late night. Allison, are you there? My mother's voice trembled. I took a slow breath, forcing my own voice to remain steady. I'm here, Mom. I walked over to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. A spare bedroom, I repeated softly, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. The irony was so thick I could taste it. It tasted like cheap coffee from a gas station at 3 a.m. and the metallic tang of exhaustion. It's just for a little while, she rushed to say, as if sensing my hesitation. Just until they can get back on their feet. You know Rachel. She's not taking this well. Mark is a wreck. I thought of Rachel, her perfect manicure, the condescending tilt of her head as she'd called me pathetic. I pictured her standing in my guest room, a room bigger than my first apartment, complaining that the thread count of the sheets wasn't high enough. The image was so vivid it almost made me laugh. What happened to their emergency fund? I asked, my tone clinical. The one Mark was talking about at Christmas, the one that was diversified across multiple asset classes? My mother was silent for a moment. I don't know the details, honey. It's all gone. They have nothing. They're staying with Mark's parents for now, but it's a tiny place. It's not a good situation. And their friends? I pressed. What about all those wealthy people they went on yacht trips with? The ones who were always in her Instagram posts? Allison, please, my mother's voice cracked. This isn't the time for that. This is your sister. She's in trouble. She's been in trouble before, Mom, usually of her own making. I closed my eyes, the memory of a dozen other dramas flooding back. Rachel needing money for a car repair after crashing the one Dad bought her. Rachel needing rent money after quitting a job because her boss was uninspiring. It was a pattern, a cycle of irresponsibility cushioned by our parents' willingness to bail her out. But this time, the hole was too big for them to fill. So they had come to me, the last resort, the pathetic one with the little jobs. I thought of my father, George, and what he always said. Real wealth is what you build with your own two hands, brick by brick. My parents had taught us that, but only one of us seemed to have been listening. Rachel had been living in a beautiful house built by a bank, a house made of debt and risky investments. I was standing in a home I had built myself, brick by brick, with sleepless nights and calloused hands. My foundation was solid. Hers had just been washed away in the first major storm. Mom, I said, my voice firm now, the decision solidifying in my mind. I understand the situation is serious, but giving them a key and a spare room isn't going to solve their problems. It's just putting a designer Band-Aid on a gaping wound. What are you saying? She whispered, and I could hear the fear in her voice, the fear that I would say no, the fear that I would be as cruel to Rachel as she had been to me. I'm saying this needs to be handled differently. I walked back to my desk where sketches for a new project were laid out. It was a multi-million-dollar commission to design a new boutique hotel downtown. Another little job. I am not going to just let them move in and pretend nothing happened. That wouldn't be helping them. It would be enabling them. So you're saying no? I'm saying I need to talk to them, I clarified. Both of them. In person. Here. I let the last word hang in the air. Here, in my penthouse. Here, in the monument to everything she said I would never be. I'm not going to discuss this over the phone with you as a messenger. If they need my help, they need to ask for it themselves. There was a long pause. I could imagine my mother processing this, running through the implications. She had wanted a simple solution, an easy fix. I was offering a confrontation. What should I tell them? She finally asked, her voice small. Tell them I'm making dinner on Saturday night, I said, a strange sense of calm washing over me. Tell them to be here at 7. And Mom, I added, tell Rachel to wear something comfortable. It's a long way up. After hanging up with my mom, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows for a long time, just watching the city lights blink to life below me. Each light was a window, a story, a life. For years, I had been one of those anonymous lights, a tiny spark in a vast constellation, working until 2 in the morning in a cramped apartment that always smelled faintly of my neighbor's cooking. Now, I was above them all, looking down. The feeling wasn't pride, not exactly. It was a profound sense of quiet, of stillness. The quiet that comes after a long and brutal war. And now, the enemy I had been fighting, the doubt, the condescension, the pity, was asking to be let inside my fortress. The next few days were a strange mix of routine and anticipation. On Thursday, I spent 10 hours with my engineering team, going over the structural plans for the hotel project. It was a beast of a building, 40 stories of glass and steel that would change the city's skyline. As I pointed out a flaw in the ventilation schematic, I remembered a time Rachel had visited my tiny studio. I was working on a design for a local coffee shop, sketches spread all over my floor. She had nudged one with the toe of her designer shoe and said, "It's cute that you have a little hobby, Allison, but when are you going to get a real job?" Now my little hobby was a project with a 9-figure budget. On Friday, I worked from home, finalizing the material choices for the lobby. Marble from Italy, wood from Brazil, light fixtures from Sweden. My phone buzzed constantly with emails and texts from contractors, suppliers, and my assistant. I was the central hub of a massive, complicated machine. In the afternoon, I took a break and went grocery shopping for the dinner. I walked through the aisles of an upscale market, the kind Rachel used to rave about. I bought fresh pasta, wild salmon, asparagus, and a bottle of wine that cost more than my first week's rent used to. I didn't do it to show off. I did it because I could. Because this was my life now, a life I had earned. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept replaying conversations with Rachel in my head. The casual insults disguised as jokes, the backhanded compliments, the sheer, unblinking confidence she had that her path was the only one that mattered. The path of marrying well, living off credit, and curating a perfect life for social media. She had built a beautiful house of cards, and Mark had been the one to light the match. Or maybe he was just the wind that finally knocked it over. I got up and walked back to the window, the city a glittering carpet below. I remembered my father, George, taking me to his small workshop behind our house when I was a kid. He was a carpenter, a master of his craft. He once told me, as he was sanding a piece of oak, "Real wealth is what you build with your own 2 hands, brick by brick." He wasn't just talking about wood and nails. He was talking about character, about resilience. He was talking about building a life so solid that no storm could wash it away. I had listened. Rachel, it seemed, had only heard the noise of the television in the other room. Saturday arrived, a cool, crisp autumn day. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment even though it was already spotless. It felt like a ritual, a way to prepare the space for a battle. I arranged flowers in a vase. I set the table with my best dinnerware. Every action was deliberate, calm. I wasn't nervous anymore. I was a surgeon about to perform a difficult but necessary operation. There would be no anesthetic for the patient. The truth was the only tool I needed. I cooked slowly, methodically. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. As I seared the salmon, I thought about what I was going to offer them. It wasn't a spare room. It wasn't a blank check. It was a mirror. I was going to hold up a mirror to their lives, to their choices, and force them to look. For the first time, there would be no parents to shield them, no credit card to bail them out, no easy escape. There would only be the two of them, my sister and her husband, sitting at my table, in my home, built brick by painful brick. At 6:30, everything was ready. The food was warming, the wine was breathing, the lights were dimmed to a soft glow. I stood in the center of my living room, the vast space silent around me. Outside, the sun had set and the city was a dazzling spectacle of electric dreams. This was my stage. I had written the script. All I had to do now was wait for the actors to arrive. I smoothed down my simple black dress and took a deep breath. I was ready. The clock on the wall ticked over to 6:59. I heard the faint chime of the private elevator ascending. They were on their way up, a long way up. The chime of the elevator was soft, but in the silence of my apartment, it sounded like a gong. The brushed steel doors slid open with a whisper. There they stood, my sister Rachel and her husband Mark. They looked like ghosts from a past life, standing in the bright, warm light of my hallway. Rachel was wearing a dress I recognized from a department store sale rack 2 seasons ago. It was a nice dress, but it wasn't her. Her was designer, exclusive, unattainable. Her hair, usually a perfect cascade of blonde highlights, looked flat. The roots were showing. Mark stood slightly behind her, his shoulders slumped. His suit was rumpled, and the confident, almost arrogant posture he always carried was gone, replaced by the weary stance of a man who had been defeated. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on the polished marble floor. For a moment, no one spoke. They just stared into my apartment, their mouths slightly open. They were looking past me, at the vast living room, the wall of windows, the glittering city spread out like a king's treasure below. It was the view Rachel had always dreamed of, the one she used to cut out of magazines and tape to her bedroom wall when we were teenagers. "Wow," Rachel breathed out. It was a small, fragile sound. The word was inadequate, and she knew it. She took a hesitant step inside, her cheap heels clicking uncertainly on the floor. Mark followed, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked, my voice even. "Water? Wine?" "Wine," Rachel said quickly, as if grabbing onto a piece of her old life. "Red, if you have it." Mark just shook his head, finally looking at me. His eyes were hollow. "Water's fine for me, Allison. Thank you." I led them to the living area. Rachel's head was on a swivel, trying to take everything in at once. The custom-built bookshelf, the original art on the walls, the minimalist furniture that screamed money because of its sheer simplicity. I saw her eyes linger on a small sculpture on a side table. She knew what it was. She'd pointed it out in a gallery catalog once, laughing about how someone would pay so much for a twisted piece of metal. We sat in silence for a few moments after I handed them their drinks. The city lights twinkled outside. It was the same awkward silence from our family dinners, but the power dynamic had been completely inverted. Here, in my space, their silence was a weakness. My silence was a strength. I decided to lead them to the dining table. "Dinner's ready," I said simply. The table was set. The salmon was plated perfectly on beds of asparagus, the fresh pasta swirled in a light cream sauce. The wine I had poured for Rachel was a deep, rich red. She picked up her glass and swirled it, a practiced gesture that now looked pathetic. "So," she began, her voice trying for a casual tone and failing, "this place is something else. You've done really well for yourself." It wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation. It was a question. "How did you, my pathetic little sister, get all this?" "I work hard," I replied, cutting into my fish. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The evidence was all around them. Mark hadn't touched his food. He just stared at his plate. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Allison," he said, his voice raspy. We're in trouble. A lot of trouble." Rachel shot him a venomous look. "Mark, we were going to ease into it." "Ease into what, Rachel?" he snapped back, his voice rising with desperation. "There's no easing into this. We have nothing. It's gone. All of it." He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "The house is in foreclosure. The cars are gone. My accounts are frozen. We're staying at your parents' house, sleeping in your old bedroom." The image was so jarring I almost couldn't process it. Rachel, with her designer handbags and condescending smirks, sleeping in the single bed with the faded floral comforter I'd had since I was 12. Rachel's face was flushed with anger and shame. "It was the market," she insisted, directing her words at me. "A bad investment. It wasn't his fault. We just need a little help to get back on our feet. A short-term loan, that's all, to tide us over." I listened, taking a slow sip of my water. I let her finish, let all her excuses and justifications hang in the air between us. She talked about bad luck, about business partners who had betrayed Mark, about the unfairness of it all. She painted a picture of two innocent victims caught in a storm they couldn't control. She didn't mention the lavish vacations, the constant shopping sprees, the life lived entirely on credit and appearances. When she was done, the silence returned, heavier this time. I set my fork down gently. "I'm not going to give you a loan, Rachel," I said calmly. Her face hardened. "What? After everything? We're your family." "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And that's why I'm not going to give you a blank check. It wouldn't help you. It would just be a patch on a sinking ship." I looked at both of them, my gaze steady. I remembered my father, George, in his workshop, sanding down a piece of wood until it was perfectly smooth. He always told me, "Real wealth is what you build with your own two hands, brick by brick." They had never built anything. They had only borrowed, postured, and consumed. Their foundation was sand, and the tide had finally come in. "You didn't come here for a loan," I continued, my voice firm but not unkind. "You came here because you have no other options. You came here to ask for my help. So ask." Mark looked down at his hands, his shoulders shaking slightly. Rachel stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief and fury. She had expected me to be the same old Allison, the one who would shrink under her glare, the one who would do anything for a scrap of family approval. She was realizing, right here at my dinner table, that that person no longer existed. "I have an offer for you," I said, leaning forward slightly. "It's not money, it's a plan, but you have to want it. You have to be willing to work for it. You have to be willing to start from the very bottom." The ball was in their court now. They could swallow their pride, or they could walk out with nothing. The choice was theirs. Rachel stared at me, her mouth a thin, hard line. The fury in her eyes was so intense it was almost a physical force. I could feel her trying to push me back, to make me small again, the way she always had. But the walls of my penthouse were solid, and so was I. "My offer is simple," I said, my voice even. I folded my hands on the polished surface of my dining table. "I own several businesses, as you know. One of them is a high-end commercial cleaning service that handles office buildings downtown. It's expanding. I need a new crew supervisor. The pay is hourly. You start at the bottom just like everyone else. Training is at 6 a.m. tomorrow." I turned my gaze to Mark. "And for you, Mark, one of my logistics companies has an opening in the warehouse. It's a packer position. It's physical, long hours on your feet. The pay is decent, with benefits after 90 days. You'd start on Monday." Silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside my floor-to-ceiling windows. Then, Rachel let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a horrible sound, brittle and full of contempt. "A cleaner? You want me to be a janitor? You must be joking." She looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. "This is your grand plan? To humiliate me? To see me scrubbing floors while you sit up here in your glass tower?" "It's a job, Rachel," I said quietly. "It's honest work. It pays the bills. It's a first brick. You can't build a house without the first brick." "I would rather live on the street than take your charity," she spat, her face contorted with rage. She stood up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You enjoy this, don't you? Seeing us like this. You've been waiting your whole life for this moment, you pathetic little—" "Enough, Rachel." Mark's voice was low, but it cut through her tirade like a knife. He hadn't moved. He was still staring down at his hands, which were clasped tightly on the table. She whirled on him. Enough? She's offering to make us her servants, and you're just going to sit there. He finally looked up, first at her, then at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. All the arrogance was gone, scraped away by failure. "Is it a real job, Allison?" he asked me, his voice hoarse. "A steady paycheck?" "Yes," I said. "You show up, you do the work, you get paid. Simple as that." "We're leaving," Rachel declared, grabbing her worn-out handbag from the floor. It was a cheap, generic bag, a universe away from the Italian leather she'd flaunted at our parents' house. "I am not staying here to be insulted." She grabbed Mark's arm, trying to pull him up. "Let's go, Mark." He didn't budge. He looked at her hand on his arm, and then he slowly, deliberately, pulled his arm free. "No," he said. Rachel froze. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no," he repeated, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. He looked directly at his wife. "I'm tired, Rachel. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of having nothing. We lost everything because of me. Because I listened to the wrong people and because I was too proud to admit I was in over my head. Now your sister, Allison, is offering us a way to start over. A real way. And I'm not too proud to take it." He turned back to me. "I'll take the job, Allison. The warehouse job. I'll be there on Monday. Just tell me where." The color drained from Rachel's face. She looked back and forth between us, her expression a mixture of shock and betrayal. She had always been the one in control, the one who dictated their lives, their friends, their spending. For the first time, Mark was not following her lead. "You would choose her. And her disgusting job. Over me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm choosing to work, Rachel," he said sadly. "I'm choosing to pay our debts. I'm choosing to build something again, even if it's from scratch. You can come with me, or you can keep pretending you're better than this. But I'm done pretending." For a long moment, she just stood there, speechless. I could see the war raging inside her pride against her desperation. I saw the little girl who always had to have the best doll, the teenager who mocked my secondhand clothes, the woman who measured her worth in brand names. That person couldn't bend. She could only break. And then she broke. With a sob of pure rage and frustration, she turned and fled. She ran out of my apartment, and the sound of the heavy door slamming shut echoed in the sudden quiet. Mark didn't even flinch. He just let out a long, shuddering breath, like a man who had been holding it for years. He looked utterly defeated, but also, for the first time that night, free. I wrote down the address of the warehouse and the name of his supervisor on a piece of paper. I slid it across the table to him. He took it with a shaky hand. "Thank you, Allison," he said, not meeting my eyes. I'm sorry for everything." "Just be there on Monday, Mark," I said. He nodded, stood up, and walked to the door. He left quietly, closing it gently behind him. I was alone. I walked over to the vast window and looked out at the sparkling tapestry of the city below. The life I had built. I felt no joy in my sister's downfall or my brother-in-law's humbling. I just felt a quiet, profound peace. My father was right. Real wealth, real strength, was what you built with your own two hands, brick by brick. Some people, like Rachel, would rather have no house at all than be seen laying the first brick. Others, like Mark, finally understood that the first brick, however small and rough, was everything. It was the foundation of a future. And I had built mine on solid ground. From the quiet dining room to owning my city view, I built this from scratch. Mark's humbling and Rachel's downfall brought me peace, not joy. What did you make of my climb? Subscribe for more stories of building your own empire.